Episode 61 this week, Plato's Stepchildren. This one of the all-time classic episodes, perhaps the most famous episode of the original series of Star Trek. The Enterprise goes to this planet, Platos, where they beam down because they got a distress call. There's a dwarf there, and he's trying to warn them about something, but then he gets summons and he goes walking backwards to this big room. Apparently, the people on the planet were space travelers. They'd visited Earth during the ancient Greek era and based their entire civilization on that. And then when Greece fell, they moved on to a new planet. When they got to the new planet, they developed telekinesis and telepathy. But one of them had been cut, and apparently they had no antibodies in their system, so the tiniest a cut could be fatal. Dr. McCoy, without even running a single test, looked at the guy, knew his infection was horrible, and he was in bad shape, just by glancing from across the room, apparently, because that's what happened. But Dr. McCoy treats the patient after the guy's telekinesis went haywire, and he started throwing things all over the room. He was so happy that McCoy could treat him, he demanded McCoy stay there for the rest of his life. McCoy didn't want to do that, and he told him so. Kirk didn't want McCoy to do that, he told him so, but the guy was insistent. Then they started keeping the Enterprise in check. They had no transporters. The ship couldn't break orbit. He had them prisoner, essentially. He was forcing Kirk and Spock to do weird things. McCoy was aghast, but he kept telling them no, no, no. The dwarf they had met explained how they had this telekinesis. Kirk determined that it had to be from the natural foods that they were eating on the planet, because they didn't have it before. So they figured out what in the food caused the telekinesis. McCoy made a serum where they could inject themselves and have the same telekinesis abilities, apparently. Why the dwarf didn't have the same abilities, they said his body was too small, and what caused the dwarfism prevented the nutrients from properly working and giving him the telekinesis. So they said. Nurse Chaplain and Lieutenant Uhura beamed down. They said they couldn't help themselves, they just walked to the transporter, beamed down. They didn't know why. It was the telekinesis. The telekinesis. And the Playoceans, they made Spock and Nurse Chapel make out while Uhura and Kirk made out. That's what happened. But then Kirk was able to use the telekinesis. He's like, oh, I got double the power you do. And you're like, oh no, we've been foiled. We've been foiled. They let McCoy go. Everything was alright. They even took the dwarf with them so they could get him off that planet, since everyone was abusing him and making him do weird things and dangerous things and threatening his life. So we got out of there quick. Some interesting notes. The dwarf that was on this show was considered to be a couple of different characters earlier on. Didn't get those, but they brought him in for this episode. This is also the famous episode that was supposed to have been the first interracial kiss on broadcast TV, but most people forget I Love Lucy. I Love Lucy. They forget that when they said this was it. And this episode was threatened to be unaired by southern stations, but it did air on the stations. The network did several takes of the Uhura Kirk kiss so they could make sure that everything was going to be satisfactory to their standards. Kirk messed one of them up on purpose so they couldn't air the one that was the least realistic looking one. So he thumbed his nose at the networks and went off their orders. And that's pretty much the episode.